Hey, it's time for Dr. David Markwell from Ridgeline Counseling, and our subject today is conflict. Dr. Markwell, are you there with us?
I'm here, Brian.
Okay, when we do the subjects and we get the we get everything ready, I don't know if it's just me, but this week's subject, conflict. I probably need a couple of conflict resolution sessions personally myself, so I'll say that. But that's our subject of today, and when we encounter conflict, how to deal with it, and some of the things surrounding it.
Exactly. Yeah, this time of year, I know we had talked previously that, it's also a very stressful time of year, but you made a comment previously before where you had mentioned, I think it was around Thanksgiving, that a lot of times when we're around family and let's say the weather's not nice and we're inside, the likelihood is that, there's going to be a greater chance of some anxiety and some stress. And of course, following probably along that same line would be a greater likelihood of some conflict with family members, maybe some unresolved issues from the past. And so definitely I thought it would be not just because of the holidays, but conflict is an inevitable thing. It doesn't always mean that it's going to not bring about some positive change, but a lot of people definitely either don't like conflict and find themselves in conflict, or sometimes aren't sure exactly how to, resolve the conflict.
Dr. Markwell, it's been said to me directly that not everything I think has to be said.
That's a very good point. Absolutely.
Oh, so you're backing that up. Okay. All right. So, and that's some of the things sometimes. Let me ask you a question. When is it good to say something you've wanted to say? And, I know sometimes when you're seeing people and around the holidays, and there's the old saying of just keep your mouth shut, but when would it possibly be time to talk to family members or whatever? And if you get in a situation where there is conflict, how do you avoid it, or what do you do next to end it?
Sure. Well, I think first and foremost, if possible, try to measure it by, what is the importance or the urgency behind the need to discuss what we need to discuss. But I will be honest with you, there's a saying in therapy that's been around for years: what we resist will persist. And so sometimes if I go through life not addressing something that's bothering me, it will begin to fester, and then if I'm not careful at some point, and usually it's in some type of maybe gathering or in a personal, intimate relationship, where all of a sudden everything begins to flow. So I think two things. One is you want to make sure that you're weighing what is the benefit of bringing this up. Maybe it's something that is necessary and important and urgent. And I guess the second part of it would be, is the purpose of it to obtain some positive change with this person or the situation, or is it really more just me wanting to have my way or my say?
Is it better if we know conflict, you can have instantaneous conflict with somebody, and how to resolve that or handle that you walk into a situation and there's immediate conflict, and people shy away from that. Some people have the personality that they go right into the conflict and don't think twice about it. Some people shy away from it. But on when you're going in a situation, we are going to stay because we are still in the holidays here and Christmas, and you're going in a situation where you may be with somebody that you could have conflict with. Is it better to talk that out with somebody first before getting there, or something in advance with someone, much like yourself, your spouse, or at least have the conversation before you get where you're going?
I would suggest that, because a lot of times our ego gets in the way and we feel that we deserve the right to say this, or we are at a point where this person deserves us saying that to them. And sometimes to maybe pass it by someone else and say, hey, I'm thinking about maybe talking with my parent or my sibling about something, and this is what I'm thinking about. What do you think? It's very similar very often that the theory behind if you're going to send an email that may contain some information that's kind of testy or conflictual, they always suggest that you write the email, step away from it, wait a little bit of time, let someone else read it, or come back later when maybe emotions are not as much, and then kind of reread it. And a lot of times what we end up doing is either editing, adapting, or sometimes not even sending the email. So yeah, I would agree. I think it would be good, especially on certain topics. You made a very good point. Sometimes conflict is inevitable in the sense that we may just walk right into it and not be prepared for it. And in those situations, it's usually best to, as the old saying is, stay calm, cool, and collected. Allow the other person to share what their thoughts and feelings are. And then I always try to say, remember the difference between responding and reacting. Reacting is more of an emotional response that's led by the emotions and feelings. And a response, even though there are feelings involved, meaning like we may have the butterflies in our stomach, or we may feel like a bead of sweat coming down because we're nervous about the conflict, we're letting the feelings stay behind, and we're just responding to the situation versus reacting maybe to what's being said.
I think that's very important. When you react, you have that immediate reaction. Responding, I think it's a very good point. And I'm glad you brought that up because it's very helpful here. Myself thinking of, when you run into something that may be, a conflict, controversial, there's reacting and responding. And responding, generally, you've thought it out.
Exactly.
And you've taken the time to process it.
Exactly. I always, if I'm working with, let's say, parents and teenagers in a counseling session, or maybe even spouses or companions, what I will sometimes tell them is, imagine, for example, paramedics, EMTs, firefighters, they're referred to as first responders and not first reactors. So when they get to an emergency scene, it's exactly what you said, Brian. They have thought out, they've studied, they have all the knowledge as to how to handle the situation, even though it may be a very energetic or anxious, provoking situation. They're not going to come there and react emotionally and maybe criticize the person for their decisions or critique, the decision they made. They're actually going to just respond to the situation.
They assess the situation when they show up first. They don't just come running into a burning building. They assess, and that's why they're first responders. A very, very great example there, because they assess the situation,
exactly.
and then they look at how to deal with it. And we could take a simple lesson there. Dr. Markwell, I appreciate it. I do want to say, with the holidays, get your reaction to this. I always say that halfway to the relative's house is when your wife tells you who's really going to be there. Okay? And no, this is mine. So you're halfway to the relative's house for Christmas. That's when you find out who's going to be there. I've been meaning to tell you, cousin so-and-so is going to be there. And then that gives you a chance to react and say, why didn't you tell me at home? Well, I didn't want you. You won't turn the car around and go home. And if I told you at home, you may not have gone to dinner or gone to Christmas with family and friends. So you have to. And then the wife obviously then says to you, "And I don't want to hear anything out of you when we get there." Right? Am I on the right track or not?
I do believe that sometimes there is, when we get quarantined in a car, we sometimes are cornered and we have no way out at that point.
Sometimes that's the only way it can work. But I want to thank you so much. We're talking about conflict today with Dr. David Markwell from Ridgeline Counseling. You're going through the holidays, and we do have certain different kind of conflicts that that surrounds us in our life that we come up on a daily basis, or maybe family and friends. I would suggest that you talk to somebody about that conflict, because if it just keeps churning inside, that's not good. Reacting, responding is very important. I enjoyed that. That meant a lot to me, and I appreciate you very much, Dr. Markwell. Anything else on conflict resolution that you'd like to share with our audience today before you go, sir?
Well, just the fact that not to look at conflict as a negative or something that positive cannot come from, and to realize that there can be some change that can come from conflict. Conflict usually indicates that something is built up and it needs to be resolved or relieved, and it's more along the lines of what you said earlier. It's conflict resolution. It's learning the appropriate ways of how to resolve and relieve the conflict, and make ourselves more positive and progress in our path.
Dr. Markwell, we appreciate you very much. Thank you. Always a pleasure. We've been on the line with Dr. David Markwell of Ridgeline Counseling. As you can see on the screen there, 706-314-8807. You can talk with Dr. Markwell today, maybe get to know him and share some things, some of the subjects or the topics we talk about every week with Dr. Markwell direct. Also, you can find all of our segments for Ridgeline Counseling with Dr. David Markwell on our YouTube channel, FYN TV, Fetch Your News YouTube channel. Subscribe there. Go to the playlist, and you'll find Ridgeline Counseling with Dr. Markwell. And we have several subjects we've addressed with the doctor. Okay, and next week, a new subject. I don't have it yet. We do them 3 or 4 at a time. So I don't have the new subject, but we'll cover one again next week with Dr. Markwell. Thank you.